Hi folks, Wooden Boat Dan here. Just wanted to give you a heads up. The podcast you're about to listen to was recorded several years ago, so some of the phone numbers, email addresses, website links, and time-sensitive information are no longer valid. Please keep that in mind as you listen. If you'd like to contact me, my email address is woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Hooked on Wooden Boats weekly podcast episode number 47. I am your host, Dan Matson, aka Wooden Boat Dan, and this is the world's first podcast fully dedicated to celebrating the art, craft, history, tradition, and romance of wooden boats all over the world. Welcome to the show today, folks. I am podcasting from one of my favorite spots in Puget Sound, which is the Bayview State Park. I am sitting in my car on my lunch break with my microphone contraption on my lap on top of a cooler lid, and I've got my notes out and I'm ready to rock and roll. This podcasting is way too much fun. Anyway, thanks for tuning in today. The featured segment today is an interview with Sean Koomen. Sean is an instructor at the Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building in Port Hadlock, Washington. And Sean is a graduate of that school in 2003. After graduating, he went to work in several different boat yards and shipyards around the U.S., both in Brooklyn, Maine, which, as you know, is a mecca for wooden boats, and also down in San Francisco. I believe it was at Rutherford boat yard there. Got some great experience, really fun stories about how he got into wooden boats, so stick around for that interview. I think you're going to enjoy it. Well, as far as news on my end, I've decided that a triathlon may be in my future after all. I did kind of an experimental triathlon Saturday. So here's what it looked like. I got up at about 6, and at 7 o'clock, I left my home in my car, and I drove to Coupeville, Washington. And from Coupeville, I took a ferry to Port Townsend, Washington. That was the second leg. Had my bike on the ferry. And the third leg was to ride 10 miles from Port Townsend to Port Hadlock for the 31st anniversary celebration of the Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building. So that's how I'm kind of easing into the triathlon thing is drive, ferry, and bike. And, maybe sometime I'll, instead of doing the 65-mile drive, I'll jog that. And then I'll swim across the sound and then bike to Port Hadlock. No, that ain't going to happen. But it was really a blast taking my bike on the ferry. It was a gorgeous day. And I've never ridden my road bike from anywhere in Port Townsend, for that matter. And there's a really cool trail along the water. Took my backpack, got to the wooden boat celebration there at the school, changed my clothes, and did a couple interviews. I had a great time. Saw a bunch of people that I've met and gotten to know over the last few years, actually over the last year mainly. Marty Loken from the Island Boat Shop, who I've interviewed. Wayne Chimeni from the Community Boat Building Program, Tall Ship Sailor, who I've interviewed before. Pete Leonhouse, of course, my personal agent. Thanks, Pete, for being there for me and help setting up interviews. Also, let's see, who else was there that I knew? Several other people, some instructors, Jeff Hammond, who I'd met before, Bruce Blatchley, who I've interviewed. And then I was able to interview Sean Koomen, who is an instructor there at the school, and I just met him for the first time. And then also I was able to interview John Welsford, mainly small boat designer from New Zealand. Had a fabulous time with John and learned that my accounting occupation really should be more accurately called fighting ghosts. But we'll get into that later, what that means. So anyway, had a great day in Port Hadlock at the Northwest School there. The weather was gorgeous. It was about 85 or 90 degrees. Got out sailing on a 28-foot Gunter yawl rig dory with Wayne Chimeni and some high school students. Got to see the Scamp boat. Got to take some pictures around the school, do the interviews. Got back on my bike about 4 o'clock and got the 5:15 ferry, and I was home by 7:30. So it was a full day, but it was a lot of fun. So thanks to everybody that helped make that a great day. I really appreciate it. Okay, we're going to move on now. A little update on my Sassafras 12-foot canoe. Basically, the boat could go in the water today and float and be usable, but I have two major tasks, or minor if you want to call them, one minor, one major. I need to install the decks, and I need to finish the boat out. So on the deck installation, I'm going to be using my 1/4-inch Akumi plywood, and I'm going to be installing it on top of the innels. And as I got farther into my canoe shop book, I realized that if I had done a better job of placing the innels on the inside of the top plank of my boat, I could have recessed or made my deck flush with those innels, and it would have looked a little bit nicer. But I didn't do that. I was in a little bit of a hurry, so the innels at the very end they don't come nicely together in a miter joint and all that sort of stuff. So instead, the deck is going to go on top of the innels, but I don't just want a piece of 1/4-inch plywood sticking up there. So I think what I'm going to do is cut a piece of mahogany about 1/4 by 1/4 inch and epoxy that to the outside of my deck, and then round off the edges so it gives it a little nice outline, and then put that, epoxy that to the boat. Because if I round off the plywood, obviously you're going to see the veneers of plywood on top of the boat, which is going to look kind of weird. So I've got to do that little detail work, cut a 1/4 by 1/4 piece of mahogany and sand that off nicely, get it epoxied. So that'll take me a little bit of time. And then I've got to put the finish on the boat, which will mean I'll be putting 2 coats of epoxy on everything that doesn't have epoxy on it now, except for the gunnels and the decks. I'll be putting epoxy, 2 coats of epoxy, and I've been learning from reading more that I want to do that as the temperature is dropping, not rising, because as it's rising, the atmospheric pressure is rising, I think. I'm not a meteorologist, but this is my layman's understanding, and that creates a bunch of tiny bubbles in your work, which I noticed I've got a few of those on the inside panels of my boat, because I was probably applying the epoxy when the temperature was rising instead of dropping. Anyway, so my plan is to epoxy those parts of the boat, 2 coats of epoxy, and then paint those. And then on the gunnels and the decks, I want a clear finish, but I don't think I'm going to go with varnish. I don't think I want the maintenance and time-consuming preparation and application and maintenance of varnish, even though I love bright work on a boat. So I've been looking at alternatives. One is what's called a boat sauce, which is what the Northwest Boat School uses. And it's basically a mix of teak oil and teak oil, pine tar, and what's the third ingredient? Now I can't remember. I'm going to have to look. Hang on just a second. Okay, so I'm back, and what it is, it's a gallon of teak oil and a pint of varnish. And it doesn't have to be any fancy varnish. And you basically put 3 or 4 coats of that on in the sun, and the sun kind of makes it kick off. You wait maybe a couple hours between coats, and you end up with a finish that brightens the wood up. It goes on like an oil, so you just eliminate a lot of the problems that you can have with varnish, and it looks pretty decent. I've seen some of the boats. It's not like bright work, but it's probably the second best looking type of finish you could have. So that's one option I'm looking at. The other option is using just a straight pinotrol, which is a product that's used to help paint flow better. And I was talking to Wayne Chimeni Saturday at the anniversary celebration, and on the dory that we were on, the gunnels were all finished just with straight penetrol, nothing else. And they looked really nice. And Wayne says it goes on easy, 3 or 4 coats, and you don't have to sand to refinish. You just rub more on. So probably going to do one of those things. So I'm looking forward to trying. I'm going to probably try that on some sample wood before I go for the real thing. So that's the update on the canoe. Still shooting for the end of August to be done with that. Last Thursday, I completed my podcast 46, and I put it online and I published it. And I thought it had been published, but when I went to some of the sites that pick up the RSS feeds, like iTunes and Pocket Casts, it wasn't there. And so, anyway, make a long story short, there were some technical problems. My feed size was too big. I just found that out today. So I apologize if you're a subscriber to my podcast through one of the RSS feed services. You wouldn't have had access to the podcasts until today, which is Monday, which is about 4 days late. But anyway, the podcast 46 is out there now, and I know how to fix that problem in the future. So thanks for being patient there. Also on iTunes, I've got 19 5-star reviews now, which is pretty cool. I'm getting a few of those every month, and I'd love it if you like the show, if you'd go there and give me a 5-star review. That would be awesome. Also, I recently opened up a store, Hooked on Wooden Boats store, where you can buy t-shirts, hats, mugs, flip-flops, phone cases with the Hooked on Wooden Boats logo. And if you go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/store, STORE, that'll take you to the page where you can order products. And it actually, the purchases go through a company called Cafe Press. They give a 30-day money-back guarantee, and I've got a t-shirt and hat myself, and they're really nice products. They're not the cheapest ones around, but they're really good quality, and they look nice. They've done a good job with putting the logo on. So I would love it if you wanted to support me, if you'd order something there. Okay, I guess that's about it for news right now, except that, let's see, I'll just mention this week on Thursday, I'm going to be going to Port Townsend with my son Josh. We're going to visit the Scamp boat building class for part of that day and do some interviews and take some photos. So I'm really looking forward to that because I love that little Scamp boat. In fact, I think I've got one in my future somewhere. Got to save up a little money first. And we're going to go over and do that, probably take our bikes, so that should be a fun trip. So probably have some more interviews coming out of that. Okay, let's move forward now with the interview with Sean Koomen of the Northwest School of Wood and Boat Building in Port Hadlock, Washington. Take it away, Sean. Okay, it's August 4th, 2012. I am with Sean Koomen. Sean, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks
Good
for having
me.
Yeah.
So Sean and I just met this morning. We're at the 31st annual, we're at the anniversary celebration of the 31st year of the Northwest School of Wood and Boat Building.
That's right. Yeah.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah, it is.
And Pete Leanhout's my personal agent in the wood and boat world. Introduced Sean and I a little bit ago, and Sean's an instructor here. And so, Sean, tell me a little bit about yourself. What have you been up to since you were born?
Since I was born, that goes a long way, I guess. But I got into boats, I guess, at a pretty early age. When I just fell in love with them, their shape, everything about them, how they're built, and started growing up in southern Minnesota, actually.
Oh, really?
And I found a book people probably know, the Dynamite Payson's How to Go Build a Wooden Boat, and I Xeroxed that from the library, totally illegal, photocopied the whole thing, and took that home and got started building boats that way.
Really?
Long story short, stole my parents' van and cut down an oak tree. felled it into the creek, had to pull it out of the creek. Anyway, had to get some steam bent white oak, some fresh white oak to put some frames in a boat. And that was my first experience in the problem solving of boat building.
So how old were you then?
I was 14.
Oh, really?
So they were out of town, and I was only borrowing the truck, on the farm, but I had to move it from one side to the other, and they found out about it and weren't too impressed, but I got the wood I needed. And anyway, went from there, and in college.
What boat did you build in?
It was a small lobster boat. It really never finished.
Oh,
it
really?
was just an experiment, I guess, prototype. Got going in there, and then went up to, got into school, into college, started my own small boat building shop, built a couple boats through there, and then...
You started your own shop?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Started a shop, I called it Red Barn Boat Works, because that's the barn I started at my parents' place in Mankato, Minnesota.
Okay.
And I built a couple small canoes, a couple rowing skiffs, and a couple sailboats, small boats. And then when I was in college, I just realized that I really wanted to learn boat building the right way. So I came out to the Northwest School of Boat Building in 2003, and did their 9-month program. And as soon as I graduated, got down to California, and since I've been working as a shipwright between California and Maine out of Brooklyn Boatyard, and now back to California, working on some projects in the Bay Area, and now I'm back up here in Port Townsend teaching, and it's great to be up here.
Okay. Yeah. So let's back up and get some more details. Sure. You went through that 29 or whatever, how many year period pretty fast there. So so your first boat build was about when you were 14. You got Dynamite Payson's book.
Yep.
Paxson or Payson?
Dynamite Payson. Yep.
Dynamite Payson, And then you just started building boats on your own after that.
Yeah, that kind of got the bug going, and then I started doing more and more. Then I built a small kayak, and then in high school...
These are all wooden boats?
These are all wood boats,
okay.
Yeah. And then when I was in college, I was fortunate to stumble upon a grant program that they had, where essentially I started writing grants to start my own business at school. It was an endowment given to the school.
Really?
And I was given a sum of money every year for materials and equipment, and I could build boats and sell them. So I started my own boat building business in college.
And I was paying for that.
Yeah.
For my taxes.
Yes.
Well, good for you.
Well, it was private school, so I don't know, but maybe.
Well, if I was, that was a good use of money.
But a good way to, I thought it was a great use for money, going into building boats there. So I built 4 boats there and sold all those boats.
Yeah.
And then...
and that was the Red Barn.
That was Red Barn Boat Works.
Is that still around?
No. I mean, that was just my...
Seems like I ran across a Red Barn boat something on the internet.
As far as I know, it's not.
Really? Okay.
There could be. I'm sure there are other Red Barn Boat Works around.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah. All right.
But I haven't revived it.
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
So you did that during college with a grant?
During college with grant money.
Yeah.
And from there, I was in college and realized I wanted to learn it right. And I really wanted to come to the Pacific Northwest.
What were you studying in college?
I actually was studying cello performance. I was a music major.
Really?
And went in on a music scholarship and was there for 3 years. And 5 hours a day in the practice rooms really started getting to me, playing the cello. So that was my outlet, was this small boat building business.
Oh, okay.
So I spent more and more time in there, and eventually it just sucked me right off my major in college, and I came to Port Townsend.
Did you finish college?
I did not.
Okay. No. I don't know. I shouldn't have asked that probably. But
no, absolutely. It's a fair question.
But that helped you get to where you
it was
are
the
today,
right path for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
It worked for me.
If you hadn't gotten that grant, you might not have done that.
Yeah.
So you fell in love with building boats, but you thought, I need to learn how to do this right.
Yeah.
So how did you pick Pacific Northwest over other areas, other schools and
stuff? Well,
I
like a lot of our students, I think I looked a lot at the other schools around the country, and the only one I felt inclined to come visit was a Northwest school of boat building, just because I really love the Pacific Northwest, and I really could relate to the mission of the school out here, trying to push the West Coast history, and I've always felt a connection to the West Coast since I was born out here.
Oh, you were?
Yeah,
okay.
In Southern California.
Okay.
And so I came out to visit, and as soon as I got here, I was hooked.
Really?
I knew I wanted to come here. So
you were hooked on wooden boats.
Yeah,
that's the name of the show.
Again.
Thanks for saying
that.
Right on. So you came out here and in 2003. And how long was the program at that time?
That time, the school was up at Otto Street in the closer to town.
Right.
And
okay.
It was just a 9-month program, so it was just October to June, I think, or end of September to June.
Okay.
And I specifically remember I was handed my diploma from Ray Speck at graduation. I gave him a handshake, and then I think about 10 minutes later I left, and the car was already packed, and I was on my way to California for my first job down in Richmond.
So you had a job lined up?
Yep.
So what was your first job in California?
Working for Rutherford's Boat Shop down in working on a 135-foot steam yacht restoration from 1901, and did that for a couple of years. And,
years.
That was a good project. I didn't do the full project.
Worked on the same boat for a couple of years? Wow.
And along with Jeff Rutherford, he's the owner of the shop, working in his yard, repair and restoration of boats that came in and out, but then also helping on that project. Rebuilt both of her deck houses, which were about 30 feet long, 30 feet by 10. It was a pretty substantial boat. So
you replicated the original build with planking or whatever was used?
Yeah, those houses were a combination of old Cuban mahogany that they had on that boat from 1901. And so that was a real hard project of matching wood that's over 100 years old with our current supply of mahogany today and getting all that patina and color to match. And that was a fun project.
But you guys made it work, huh?
Yeah, boat's all done. She went from San Francisco through the canal up the East Coast, and she's out in Maine. So
she's a steamboat?
She's a steam yacht, yep.
Really? So they run her on steam still?
Yep, triple expansion steam engine that was restored, I guess, about 20 years ago. And that was the first part of the boat was restored. And then as the hull was restored and everything else, I think primarily that engine is one of the most, what would you say, authentic parts of the boat and original from what she was before. I think she has an original stern post as well, but most of the boat is new in terms of hull. It was a steel hull, but a lot of her woodwork and her Cuban mahogany is still there. So
is Cuban mahogany similar to like a Honduran mahogany, or
I believe so.
Deep red.
I wouldn't be the greatest authority on the different mahoganies, but it was a very rich, beautiful mahogany, and obviously you can imagine limited supply.
Yeah.
And they just happened to get that boat was built primarily out of that
Might have
wood,
looked like some of the cellos you used to play.
Yeah. It was pretty beautiful.
Do you still play the cello, by the way?
I do.
Nice.
Yeah, I tried to. Definitely not as much as I did back in college. But
okay. So you worked on the steamer down there for a couple of years.
Yep.
And by the way, I just saw the steamer Portland. Down in the Columbia River a couple of weeks ago at a festival.
Okay.
I don't know if you're familiar with that boat.
I'm not.
It's actually a steel hull with a wooden house on it. And it was built in the 50s, and it's fully functioning. It's a paddle wheel steamboat.
Okay.
That was used anyway. A little trivia there. But, so you worked for Rutherford for a couple of years. And what did you do after that?
Then I moved to northern Minnesota for a short, about 9 months. Family was in Minnesota, and I moved up to the North Shore Lake Superior and built another boat for myself. A boat that had kind of died off. It was called the Shorebird Sloop, designed by Charles Maurer, and he had designed that in the early 20s. And it was kind of a one design knockabout day sailor that he had. There were, I think, 20 or 30 of them built, but they'd all since just kind of disappeared. And I found the original lines drawing that he had in a small craft book by Schodel. I forget his first. I think it's Charles Schodel, actually.
Really?
We have it down here in the school and library, actually. And so anyway, I took those lines from that book and Xeroxed them again. So
essentially a table of offsets?
No table of offsets.
A drawing with lines?
It was just a drawing, and that was the hard part. So I expanded that drawing up into something scalable, and all I could get was about to an inch per foot. And so it was about a 22-foot boat. So that's what I could blow up to where it was still. And so all those lines, you can imagine, thickened up quite a bit.
Yeah.
So I had to reloft out the boat multiple times to try to ferret out. And then I created that table of offsets and built that boat. And that served as kind of an intermediate project while I was going from California eventually to Maine.
What size boat was that?
I think it's 22 feet.
22-foot sloop.
22-foot sloop. It's a lot like the Coolidge that's here at the boat school now, down by the water. That similar design, open cockpit.
Caravel planked boat?
Caravel planked, yep. Gaff sloop. And so I got that boat. That boat I got lofted, planked, and framed. Still sits in my parents' barn now in Minnesota.
Oh, really?
So it's unfinished.
Oh, no.
But one of these days,
you gotta go back and finish that, Sean.
Yeah. And so I was there for 9 months in Minnesota, and then I put in a call out to Brooklyn Boatyard to work for Steve White, which I had grown up reading his book. I forget the author, but it's called Wooden Boat, I believe, or Wooden Boats. And it's all about Brooklyn Boatyard and its creation, stemming down from E.B. White, the writer Charlotte's Web and all those children's books. His son, Joel White, started Brooklyn Boatyard. And Joel White, famous yacht designer now, his son Steve runs that yard. And so I eventually went out and interviewed at Brooklyn Boatyard and was hired there. So now I'm out in
Brooklyn, Maine. Okay.
Yep.
Which is a mecca for wooden boats.
Mecca, the East Coast mecca for wooden boats.
Yeah.
They actually have a sign when you drive into town that says the Wooden Boat Center of the World.
Oh, really?
Wooden Boat Building Center of the World.
Nice.
And so I worked there for 3 years.
'Cause that's where Wooden Boat Magazine is.
Yeah, Wooden Boat Magazine is there. The Wooden Boat School is there. It's all centered in Brooklyn.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that was a terrific place to work and live. And
cool. So how long were you there?
I was there for about 3 years.
And what kind of boats, what kind of stuff did you do in that shop?
That shop, I learned a lot of cold molding, building lots of larger yachts. Nothing I worked on was under 50 feet, 50 to 90 foot range.
Wow, big stuff.
3 boats while I was there, worked start to finish on a 55 footer, a 63 footer, and a 90 footer.
So for us boat building novices, cold molding, if I understand it correctly, is where you take sheets of plywood and you basically epoxy them together over a mold? Is that what it is? Or?
Sort of. And that's one way of doing it. How we do it at Brooklyn Boatyard is we're actually taking veneers of solid lumber. And we're building semi-traditionally where you set up a whole backbone for the boat upside down. You still have laminated frames in there.
You have your stations set up?
You still have, the molds, or the frames become your molds and your stations. You set up a whole backbone, solid backbone with transom and stem.
Yeah.
And then you spile and lay an inner layer of planking that's thinner than it would be normally on a boat that size. And that becomes your medium for vacuum bagging veneers down. So you lay down a 4.5 layer of veneer on the boat, or of planking, and then you go double diagonal veneers, so they're crisscrossing at 45, so something thinner and lighter, like a red cedar. And then on the outer layer of that, you lay, depending on the boat, but you lay another layer of either cedar or mahogany or something. So you're creating plywood. You're right. It is a plywood, but it's a solid wood plywood, or a solid lumber plywood.
It's all epoxy together?
And it's all epoxy together and vacuum bagged.
That sounds like a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, but it actually produces a boat faster than Carvel planking.
It's lighter and stronger type of thing?
It is lighter, stronger, stiffer hull, and to give an idea, we would build a 56-foot Sparkman Stevens, traditional sailboat out there in about 9 months from start to finish, with a crew of 6. So it goes really fast. And as soon as you get that hull built and turn the boat over right side up and start doing the deck and interior, it's pretty much solid traditional from there. Really? So it was a great experience to get into some bigger boat building.
So what does the vacuum bagging do? What is the purpose of that?
When you put the bag on those veneers, it helps to pull all the glue into all the voids and any air and get an actual, and it also compresses all the veneers together. So you actually, it's becoming this big, the atmospheric pressure is pushing on this vacuum that you've created and pushing all your veneers down onto your mold or your inner planking, whatever you've laid down, and then at the same time pulling all the resin and epoxy to fill all the voids, so you have no air bubbles or any air voids in your planking or your laminate.
So you essentially bag the whole hull and suck the air out of it?
Essentially, yeah. We do about half a bag at a time, but that's the overall idea of it. Yep.
Interesting.
So it was a real fun method to learn to build out there, and help to kind of take the skills that I was learning to a different direction and get into some more contemporary kind of boat building. Yeah. But combined with the tradition of what people want out there too. So interesting.
So that would take a little longer to build the hull that way than Carvel planked, or
a little faster.
A little faster, really. Yeah. Interesting. But you got to have the right equipment and the know-how.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I'm sure any shop that's set up right and in their own skill and their own methods is as efficient as any other. So
so if I go home with my little food vacuum bagger thing, that probably won't help me at all.
You never know. Maybe for a small little boat or
probably
something.
Doesn't have enough suction.
Yeah.
Maybe I could build a half model.
You could do a half model cold mold. Sure, that'd be great.
So you were in Maine 3 years. And so that must have been pretty fun. Now, did you meet your wife in California when you were down there?
Actually, a good question. I met my wife out in Maine. I was working with her brother, Paul Waring, who's part of Waring's and Stevens Yacht Design.
Okay.
So they worked under Joel White. They were the Joel White's apprentices, basically designers. And so they are the product of Joel White's design studio. And long story short, I was working with Paul out there. I'd been there a year and a half. And Anne, my wife, came up one summer to visit. And we met mutually at a party and at a birthday party, and here we are now, married about a year now. So just had our anniversary on Monday. So,
very cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we met out there, and then she really wanted to get back to school, and really wanted to get to UCSF out in San Francisco for nursing.
Okay.
And long story short, I ended up following her out back to the West Coast.
So you left Maine. You got married in Maine? Or
No. We got married up here in Port Townsend a year ago. This was about 3 years ago that we moved I followed her from Maine to San Francisco.
To San Francisco, and she went to school.
She went to school, and then I got back involved again with Rutherford's Boat Shop.
Oh, you did? Same place?
Same place. Yeah. Just good timing. Got back into a job, which was great when I first thing I got there. Cool. Doing some smaller boat stuff, and then I was there at Rutherford's about 6 months. For that stint, 9 months, and then I went and got involved with the San Francisco Maritime Museum.
Oh, really?
And worked with them for a summer, about 4 months, and did a bunch of work on an old tugboat they have out there called the Telco.
Huh.
And
Is it in the water?
It's in the water, so did a bunch of work to her deck, reefing out all her seams, traditional cork deck, corked all the planking on there, and then traditionally filled it all with pitch. So I had a pitch pot going out on a rolling dock, which was kind of fun. You can imagine.
A pitch pot on
pitch
a rolling
pot, basically.
What does that mean?
We'll back up.
You're way over my head now.
Pitch being like essentially tar, if you want to rudimentary form, but bubbling pot of pitch out on a rolling dock, and you use that to pay it into the seams of that. Of the deck seams after you've reefed them and corked them with oakum or cotton, and you come back over and fill them with this pitch hot. And as it cools, it solidifies, and it's still kind of pliable in those seams.
I see.
And you seal your deck up that way.
I see.
So I worked for them for about 4 months, and then got on through them. I found a connection to a restoration of a 90-foot fantail yacht designed in 1922. By Geary.
Okay.
And
Ted Geary from Seattle.
Yep. And that boat was built up at Blanchard's Yard in Seattle as well.
On Lake Union.
On Lake Union.
Yeah.
And then made its way down the West Coast. I'd been up to Alaska and back and forth. Ended up in the Bay Area where it just about sank in the Petaluma River. And I got brought into the project to lead the project and led that restoration of her hull over 2 years. So we did a huge amount of planking and framing on the boat, like 120 frames, most of her topside planking, and then
steam bent frames, or
steam bent. I think those were about
wide
2 1/4 by 2 1/2 wide oak.
Ooh,
big guys.
You got to cook those for a while to get them warmed up. Huh?
Yeah, that was fun.
I bet.
So we did a bunch of work on her hull in Sausalito, and then she was moved over to Richmond again, to a dock over there. And restored all her decks, and then got into her houses and a whole variety of work.
What was she planked with?
She was planked with Port Orford cedar as well on the top sides, and Doug fir below.
Now, Port Orford cedar comes from Washington State, does it?
It does. A lot of it's coming from, I think, down in Oregon as well, and some in Idaho maybe.
Because where is Port Orford?
That is a good question. I'm pretty sure it's either Oregon or Washington down in that border. I'm pretty sure it's Oregon.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, but don't quote me on that.
All right. I won't do that.
For all the listeners, I'm sure they can look it up.
Yeah, right.
But so I was on that project for 2 years.
What was the length of that?
That was a 90-foot boat.
90-foot,
big.
Built in 1922.
Built in 1922.
Fantail.
Fantail meaning
describes the shape of the transom.
Yeah, instead of having a traditional transom or a canoe stern, which would be pointed.
Yeah.
This came in almost like if you were to think you took a golf ball and cut it in half. That would be what that transom looked like. So very complex transom,
really?
Rounded in all directions, and then came down to the water. Very beautiful lines.
A piece of artwork, huh?
Yeah. So that was fun to rebuild that stern.
That was all done with planking?
All solid wood, yep. A lot of it was built up in lifts, as we would say, where you're taking solid timbers and carving them. Because you can't physically bend that planking in that shape, so you carve it.
Wow, labor-intensive stuff.
Very.
Yeah.
So that kept me in San Francisco.
Okay.
And then from there, went on to, right before I came up here to teach at the school again this summer, I was in March, got asked to do what I have now called backbone surgery on a 1929 72-foot schooner called Vivica, which was a boat also from the Bay Area, Skeen and Payne design. And she's getting the full restoration as we speak. And I got called in to do a full backbone replacement, which involved about 3 months of labor and all solid.
Essentially the keel?
All the keel. So keel, 4-foot stem up forward, and then horn timber transom back aft. So the whole backbone. And it was all Purple Heart. Actually, that came down from Edensaw in Port Townsend. And they shipped us that Purple Heart down there.
So how do you cut that stuff?
That is a good question. Yeah.
You got to keep your tools pretty sharp.
It's a lot of, you can't just put those guys through the planer.
Rock, isn't it? Is that one of the densest woods?
It's pretty dense, but it actually, if you have the right tools, works pretty well. But you can't, those timbers are about 1,700 pounds each. So you can't just pick them up and put them in a bandsaw or a planer. It's all hand tools, and so we ended up with 6 3/4 power planes and 16-inch big timber saws to work a lot of that. So bigger. So
you get
power
it with
tools.
A crane onto a bench, and then you work it to what you want it to
exactly,
be, and then you lift it into place.
Yep, we had lots of chain falls set up in the shop to carve the timbers, and then we had all the installation was by forklift and chain fall, and no physical lifting of any kind.
Wow.
By humans, at least.
I'm a little jealous, Sean. This stuff sounds pretty fun.
That was kind of I have to admit, that was a dream project. That was very fun. I was given the project, this is your thing. You get what you need. You do what you got to do. And I had a crew of 2 or 3 guys helping me out just on the backbone alone. And it was fabulous. And then finished off with the new transom on the boat as well. So
nice.
That was.
How long were you on that project?
I was only there for about 4 months. Okay. That was I finished, I think June 5th was my last day there, and as soon as we were done, we had packed up, and my wife and I moved up here to Port Townsend.
Okay. That's when you started teaching at the school?
Yep, started at the school shortly after.
That was last year sometime?
No, that was just a month and a half ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we just got up here early June, and I think school started officially on the 2nd, was our first day of class for 4th quarter. Okay. And here we are.
Now, did your wife become a nurse then?
She is, yeah. She's a nurse practitioner.
Oh, nice.
And so she
works here in town?
She's not working in town yet, but it was a 3-year very intense program down in California, and I'm happy to say she is enjoying a summer vacation right now. Nice. So she's just taking it easy and enjoying the beautiful weather and everything up in Port Townsend, and slowly getting into the job hunt, but just kind of.
So you guys like living in Port Townsend?
We love it. Yeah.
Cool. I'm a little jealous of that too.
Yeah, it's pretty epic, I guess you could say that. It's got some days you get out, it's pouring rain, but other days you're out sailing, and you've got the Olympics and Rainier and Baker, and on a boat that the boat school built. I mean, come on, it's
it's
fabulous.
Amazing stuff. Yeah. So what is it about wooden boats that you really like? I mean, this is your deal. So what is it? Tell me. What drives that?
I am just obsessed with them, to be honest. I love the complexity of them and the problem solving. That's what keeps my mind into it all the time, is every one of these, even coming back to the school again to teach, every one of these projects has something different that has to be, problem solved or figured out. And even if you build the same boat over and over and over, it seems like you always encounter the same, or you encounter a different problem that you wouldn't expect. And so that part keeps my mind really into it.
And each boat's a little different.
Yeah.
Or a lot different.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, even if you build 2 identical sister ships side by side, they're going to be different in some way, shape, or form. But it's that problem solving that really keeps me intrigued, and just that mystery of boats. There's certain things that can't be explained of sailing, and steam bending wood and carving wood, and just lines of boats. Personally, just got me hooked.
Yeah.
I always equivalent the lines of a boat to the lines of a beautiful woman. You know, they're very elegant, it's something you can't really shape in any other medium than wood, and it just it's beautiful.
Very cool.
I really like it. So
yeah, very good.
I feel very lucky to be in that position where my job is not a job, really.
Yeah.
It's more of just, especially, you know, working as a boat builder and now as an instructor, it's more of just, I'm almost just hanging out during the day, and people are paying me to do it, and I can't believe they're doing that. You know, it's like
kind of like my accounting job. You know. Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. So you've been here. You just started back here in June teaching. Do you have any boats yourself? Do you have any small boats?
Well, I started that small shorebird sloop I was telling you about.
Oh yeah, right.
And that one's unfinished. But right now, I don't have a boat.
Okay.
I'm sure it's inevitable one day.
Boatless, yeah.
But I'm fortunate to know a lot of people that have boats in town right now, and it's a treat to go out on their boats when I can.
So you get out on the water.
So I get out on the water a fair bit, and one day, you know, get settled into town for a while. And,
cool.
I mean, who wouldn't want to build a wooden boat one day?
Right. Yeah, for yourself. Very cool. Well, I appreciate your time today, Sean.
Absolutely.
Any parting comments for our listeners?
No. Thanks for your time, and it's been really good. Come visit the school someday and say hi.
Okay, I'll do that. All right. Thanks, Sean.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Sean, for taking the time to do that interview. It was really fun meeting you and getting to see some of the projects you're working on. One of which is the Hanson Forest Service boat, which you guys have sold now to somebody in Michigan. So I got to see that, and best of luck to you, Sean, and your wife there in Port Townsend, and I'll see you around the school there. Okay, next week is going to be an interview with John Welsford of Welsford Boat Designs. John is a very well-known boat designer, very thoughtful guy, very smart guy. It was really a fun interview. It's almost an hour in length, but I think you'll enjoy every second of it like I did. Got to ask him a lot of great questions. It's just amazing some of the stuff he's done. He's the designer of the Scamp boat, of course, which may soon become one of his most popular designs. And so stick around for that interview, or come back for the interview next week with John and learn more about fighting ghosts, which is John's description of people that work in front of a computer most of their life. So I think I can relate to that. Well, I'd love it if you'd connect with me. You can contact me via email, dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com, Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest. If you look for Wooden Boat Dan, you'll find me there. You can go to my website and leave comments for each podcast that I release. I write a blog post about it with some notes, and I show some pictures, and at the bottom there's a comment section. And if you like the podcast, you can also share the podcast with others at the bottom of each post, hitting one of the Twitter, Pinterest, Facebook links there. And also you can subscribe to my e-news list if you go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/subscribe. And I send out an article or a little newsletter about once a month or every 2 months. Maybe throw in a fun video, talk about what I'm doing and some fun stuff. No pressure there, but if you'd like to subscribe, I would love it. So go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/subscribe. If you'd like to support the show, you can do so by making Amazon purchases through my website. If you go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/resources, takes you to a page with Amazon products. Click on any product there and go to Amazon and make a purchase of any product, and I get paid a little bit. Also on my homepage, hookedonwoodenboats.com, there's a button there on the right-hand side for Jamestown distributors. They sell marine supplies and boat building supplies, have great selection of stuff, really good service, fair prices. If you click on that link and purchase from them, I make a little bit of money there too. Eventually, my goal in 5 years is to have this show provide half of my income, and then after that, 100%. So I could just do this full time I just love to travel and interview people and get totally immersed in the wooden boat world. That's kind of my dream. I know I would really miss the accounting world if I do that. Not. So if you want to help support that dream, please support me. I would appreciate it. Well, I hope you're having a good week. Please let me know about wooden boat projects you're working on or people you would like for me to interview. And any fun pictures or anything, shoot them my way. Have a great week. Wooden Boat Dan over and out. Keep the bright side up and the barnacled side down. Take care. We'll talk again next week. Bye-bye.